Hey shooters, this is John with Sun and Shadow, and today we are going to be talking about how to build a hard data card for your precision rifle or scoped carbine. The hard data card contains your rifle's information so that you can achieve hits at distance. This card is set up specifically for your rifle and load and environmentals. So if you change ranges or you change a rifle or change loads, your hard data card is going to need to be readjusted or you're going to have to build a new one. So today we're going to show you how to do that. Now, why do you need a hard data card? Hard data is actually a lot easier to access when it's written down and it's directly on your arm or mounted on the gun. If you were to have your ballistic data just in your app-based solver, you'll need to continually open up your phone, get into the app, find the rifle, set it up the way that you need it to, and then scroll through until you can find the data that you're looking for directly on your app. If you continually rely on your phone, what's going to end up happening is one day your phone is going to go dead. You're going to forget your phone in your truck. The app is not going to open up when you try to open it. You're going to lose that data. You're not going to have that information available to you when you really need it. So what we do is we write down this hard data and we store it, usually in an armbands or on the gun, so that you can have this information available at all times exactly when you need it. It's actually going to be a lot faster to reference ballistic data on your hard data card than it is going to be to open up your phone and reference that information there. Now, before you can write down the data on your hard data card, you're going to need to have a ballistic profile built in your app-based solver. This means you've gone to the range, you've chronographed your rifle and the load that you're shooting, you've gathered all the environmental data, the pressure, the temperature, and the humidity of the zeroing day, and you've got all that information built into a ballistic profile in your app-based solver. After you've done that, we would like to see that you've also trued the gun as well, meaning you have fired the gun at distance. 600 yards is typically something we would use for truing, and you've confirmed that the data that you've recorded in your app-based solver is accurate out at distance. So once you've trued your ballistic profile, now you're ready to draft everything on your hard data card. So we've just come back from the range. We were working on our Sons of Liberty Gunworks 16-inch gun. This rifle we're planning to use in the general purpose division of the Quantified Performance Gas Guns series this year. So we want to make sure that we have good information on it. We have already chronographed the rifle. We've got all the environmentals for it. We've trued the gun. And now it's time for us to build out our hard data card using the app-based solver. Now I'm using Hornady 4DOF for this, so we'll go into 4DOF, we will find our favorites, and we will select the Sons of Liberty 16-inch rifle. And then from there, I've got my environmentals set up for the day of the zeroing. I've got all of the information. This profile has already been built. I built it before we left the range. And now what we're going to do is we're going to set everything up so that we can write down everything on our hard data card. So we have a hard data card here. And this template you can actually download on our website. I'll leave a link in the description, and I'll also put one down here while we're discussing. But you can download this template from our website and you can print it out yourself. We also sell these hard data cards. They're blank templates that you can draft for yourself, so you can purchase them on our site as well if you don't want to do arts and crafts and write everything down yourself. So what we've got here is the blank hard data card, and on the top we've got our rifle and the environmentals of the zeroing step. We have our load and we have our gun number, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And then we have at the very bottom, we have any notes. Typically what I'll draft down there is going to be the range that we shot at, maybe the time of year, especially if you're in an area where the temperature can fluctuate quite a bit throughout the year. So if you're up north or something, we're down here in Florida, so our temperatures are relatively stable throughout the year. and we'll talk about how we go about filling this out. So at the top we have our rifle, which I'm going to list as the Sons of Liberty Gunworks 16-inch. And then we're going to go to our app-based solver where we can record all of our environmentals, pressure being one of the most important ones. So we have 29.88 inches of mercury. We have a temperature of 80 degrees Fahrenheit for zeroing, and the relative humidity was 70% when we zeroed the gun. We were using IMI Razor Core 77 grain, which we use pretty commonly. And then I'm not going to fill out gun number right now. We'll come back to that and I'll show you how to find that in your solver. At the very bottom, we're just going to write down any notes that we had on the zeroing process. This zeroing process was done at my local club, Flagler Gun Club. And I am also going to write down the date so that I understand when this was done. This was 12/27/23 when we did all this information. So once we've got all the baseline information written down, we can start working through all of the information in our solver so we can bring it over into the hard data card. So in the solver, I am going to set our increments out to 20 yards starting at 100. And the reason that we have 20-yard increments all the way out to 1,000 is because up at the very front, 100, 200, 300 yards, the elevation change isn't really big, right? But as we get further and further out, 20 yards can have a pretty significant change in elevation, which is why we're going to record in 20-yard increments all the way out to 1,000. Now you can choose your increments if you want to have larger increments at the beginning, smaller increments at the end. That's up to you. But we just prefer to have 20 yards all the way out. Makes it really easy and clean for us to do the math if we have to do an in-between shot. So what we're going to do is we're going to be in the app. We're going to go and we're going to set our table. So we've got 1,000-yard max range, and the interval of the table we are going to set 20 yards. And now you can see over here on the left-hand side, we've got 20-yard increments going all the way out to 1,000 yards. And what I'm looking at is this total come up column. So the third column over is going to be total come up. And that is in MRADs, and we are going to start at 100 yards, and we are simply going to copy down what we have in our app-based solver onto our hard data card. So let's get started here. So at 100 yards, that'll be our zero distance. 120 is 0.1 mil. 140 is 0.2 mil. 160 is 0.3 mil. Now you can see in the solver that the total come up in MRADs is it's got an extra hundredth on it, right? So instead of 0.4 for the 180, it says 0.46. So what I'm doing in my head is I'm just simply rounding up because that rounding error really doesn't matter. I kind of wish that there was a way that I could just round that up in the solver itself to make it just a whole number. But what I'm deciding to do is round up or down depending on what the solution is. So at 180 yards, we have 0.46, and I've rounded that up to 0.5. At 200, we've got 0.61, and I'm rounding that down to 0.6. So you can just follow along in your own solver in these 20-yard increments and draft all the elevation changes that you're going to need all the way out to 1,000. So let's do that now. Now, one thing that you'll notice when I'm writing my card is that I'm not using black pen. I'm using red, and sometimes I'll use a green pen. And the reason I do that is because I like to make sure that I can clearly see the data. I want that contrast where I'm looking down at my armband. I know that the black means it's just the set information that I'm looking for, and then I know that the red is the data that I have drafted. So we've built our card out to 1,000 yards. We have all of our elevation data written down along with the information for the gun, meaning anytime we're in this particular environmental arrangement, so we've got the same pressure, temperature, humidity, that sort of thing, or close to it. This is going to be the hard data card that we use. Now, if I was going to go to a different range, say if I was going to go from Florida out west to Montana or something like that, where the elevation is different, we would want to re-chrono the gun. We would want to redo a ballistic profile in our solver because you'll find that the data is actually going to change quite significantly. And what's going to happen then is that after we've done the re-truing out at this new location, we're just going to draft a brand new data card that day. That way we can work off that card for that environment. So after we've got all of our major elevation data drafted, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at gun number. If you're not familiar with gun number, it's a really helpful way for you to understand how the wind is going to push your bullet. And the easiest way to describe it, it is the full value 90-degree wind that pushes your bullet 0.1 mil for every 100 yards of distance. And I'm not going to go into super detail on gun number. We've actually got a really great write-up on our website under our blog section where you can read more detail about gun number. And again, I'll put that link down in the description just so you can get a better understanding of it. If you don't understand gun number yet, what I would recommend is that you really try to learn it because it's been really helpful for me to understand how wind is pushing my bullet. It helps me to get a good opening wind call, and it also helps me to understand what kind of adjustments I need to make on the windage hold for different targets at different distances. So definitely recommend that you look up gun number, and I'm going to show you how to find it on your solver so that you can have it on your hard data card as you go about learning more about gun number. So in the solver, we're still on our Sons of Liberty Gunworks 16-inch carbine using the 77 grain razor core. And this time when I build a table, rather than making the increments out to 20-yard increments, what we're going to do is we're going to make them 100-yard increments because we know that with gun number, that bullet is going to get pushed 0.1 mil per 100 yards at this certain wind speed. Now, figuring out the wind speed is kind of the tricky part. So what we're going to do is first, I know that my gun is probably going to be around a 3-mile-an-hour gun. That's what we call it with gun number. So a 5.56 is typically like a 3-mile-an-hour gun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to this 2-mile-an-hour wind speed, and you can see that I've got it pushing directly to the right, 270 degrees. So if you make sure you have your full value set, so you can either do 90 degrees or you can do 270. I would just use 270 because that's how it's usually set up for me. So we've got it set right at 270 degrees. We've got a 2-mile-an-hour full value wind speed. We're going to go to our table, and we're going to set the intervals of the table out to 1,000 yards using 100-yard increments. And what we can see here over on the left-hand column of range, we've got out to 1,000 yards in 100-yard increments. And rather than looking at the total windage column, total windage is going to include spin drift, so we don't want to look at that column. Instead, we want to use this wind drift column here. So with the wind at 270 degrees left to right and a wind speed of 2 miles an hour, you can see that the wind drift is actually pretty close to what we want as far as gun number goes, where we've got 0.6 at 100 yards. That would kind of round up to 1 or 0.1. We've got 1.2 at 200 yards, where we would actually like to see it be closer to 0.2, where we could round up to 0.2 mils. At 300, we've got 0.2, 400, we've got about 0.3, 500, we've got about 0.34. So we can see that the 2-mile-an-hour wind is actually not really going to work for us very well. So we're going to go back, and we're going to adjust this to 3 miles an hour of wind. We're going to build a new table. We're going to set the interval of the table at 100 yards, scroll over to wind drift. And now looking at that wind drift column compared to the range, we've got 0.08 at 100 yards, 0.18 at 200, so that would round up to 0.2. We've got 0.28 rounding up to 0.3 at 300. We've got 0.4 at 400, 0.5 at 500, 0.6, 0.7 at 600, 0.8 at 700, and so on and so forth out to 1,000. Now you can see that right around 600 yards, there's like a little bit of a jump. It starts to add like 0.2 instead of 0.1. I don't usually really worry about that because gun number is supposed to be like really quick math that you do in your head. So that's why we say like just stick to 0.1 mil per 100 yards. Meaning if you get out to 800 yards, you would expect to have 0.8 mil of wind hold for every 3 miles an hour of full value wind. And what that means is that for every 3 miles an hour, so if it's 3 miles an hour, you should hold 0.8. If it's 6 miles an hour, you should hold 1.6. It kind of compounds as the wind speed increases by 3 miles an hour, or every 3 miles an hour. So that is supposed to be the quick math that you can do in your head. If you want really accurate wind, you're going to have to reference the solver, but for quick math that you can do on the fly, the gun number is going to be like the piece that you want. So 3 miles an hour is looking pretty good, but let's go and check 4 miles an hour to see if that's any better. And we've got 1,000 yards, we've got the interval table set to 100, scrolling over to wind drift, and you can see that we're kind of close at 100 and 200 yards. But then when we get to 300 and 400, it starts to skew a little bit off of the gun number chart that we're looking for. So it looks like that 3 mile an hour wind speed is going to be the closest match to what we're getting for gun number on this particular rifle and load. So going back to the hard data card, in the gun numbers section, we are going to write down 3 miles an hour just so that we don't forget it. And what you might see is that in each one of these blocks of 100-yard increments, we've got that gun number adjustment written down just so that you can remember a little bit. So at 100 yards out to 200 yards, we've got 0.1 mil correction for every 3 miles an hour. At 200 to 280 yards, we've got 0.2 mil correction for every 3 miles an hour, so on and so forth until we get out to 1,000 yards. Now, how you go about applying gun number is up to you. I just prefer to stick with that 100-yard like increment, right? For every 0.1 mil for every 100 yards. That's kind of how I look at it. If you were to say at 150 yards, you're kind of rounding up. You're going to say, okay, at 160, 170 yards, that's close enough to 200, so I'm going to use 0.2 instead of 0.1. If you were at 570 yards, do you want to use 0.5 for wind, or do you want to use 0.6 for wind? That's kind of up to you to round up. I just have my own system that works for me, so I'm going to say, if we're in between 5 and 599 yards, I'm going to use 0.5 mil for every 3 miles an hour of wind speed. That's just my personal method of doing things. So once we've got all of our data written down, we can place that into our armbands here so that we have it available for reference. Now, when I go to the range, I've got this armband here on my arm, and when I am working a stage, ranging targets, I can just tick off, using a pen, I can just tick off those ranges for each target, and I can use the associated elevation hold that goes along with that particular target. Now, on the hard data cards that you can purchase off of our website, these will come blank, and you'll just fill them out for yourself with your particular rifle and load. One thing that I really like about these is that on the back side of the card, we have a stage diagram and wind columns, and those wind columns will be associated with your gun number. And then the stage diagram right here is a free space for you to draw a stage diagram for that particular stage. And one of the ways that I like to use these data cards is I like to have my data on the inside of the flap, and I'll have my stage diagram and my wind columns written down on top. So I'll usually keep this side of the card blank for each one of my data cards. I'll keep this side blank here, And what I can do is I can pull my wet erase marker out, and I can actually just draw my stage diagram, any reference points, target indicators, that sort of thing, the elevation hold that goes along with that range. And then over here, I can write down my elevation holds for each target, and I can write down my wind columns, which would be like the best guess that I have for wind based on the gun number. So that's a primer on drafting a hard data card, how to use it, and also an introduction into gun number, which again, I think is a really important tool for scope carbine shooters to understand so that you can start to have better wind calls and you can make better adjustments on the fly in the middle of a stage with that real simple gun number math. If you have any questions, please reach out to me either in the comments. We're pretty active on Instagram, so you can always message us on Instagram. You can send us an email. Let us know what questions you have about hard data and how you can apply it, and we hope to see you at the range.